Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 most successful comeback albums. The music business is a fickle beast. Taste and trends are always changing, and if a musician doesn't evolve and continue to put out quality music, they can quickly fall into obscurity. In the video today we're looking at 10 artists who were standing on the edge of oblivion only to release an album that reignited their careers and secured their legacy in music history. Number 10. The Next Day. David Robert Jones, better known as David Bowie, first achieved fame in 1969 with his song Space Oddity. The theatrics of his albums and his androgynous style made him stick out amongst the English rock stars of the time. He was also known for his eclectic tastes, as Bowie never seemed to settle into any particular genre. Instead, for over 30 years he released a variety of albums that were innovative as well as influential. In 2003, Bowie released Reality, which was met with a lukewarm reception and moderate sales. With Reality being his 25th album, people thought that Bowie was done releasing music. What did he have left to prove? His seminal work of the 60s and 70s proved he was one of the most talented and original artists of all time. His work in the 80s and 90s showed that he understood musical trends, and even decades after releasing his first album, he was still releasing innovative music. Then in 2013, he surprised the media and fans alike by releasing The Next Day after a 10-year hiatus. The album drew excellent reviews, and some critics went so far as to say that it was one of the best albums Bowie ever released. It also sold well. It was his first #1 in the United Kingdom since 1993. The Next Day was nominated for 3 Grammys, including one for Best Rock Album, and it was also shortlisted for the Mercury Award, which is given to the Best British or Irish Album of the Year. Number 9. Lear Rose. At the age of 72, country legend Loretta Lynn had nothing to prove after releasing 55 albums in her long, illustrious career. She was one of the biggest country stars of the 1960s and 70s, and there was even a movie about her life called The Coal Miner's Daughter. Sissy Spacek won an Academy Award for playing Lynn. Lynn retired from music in the 1990s to look after her sick husband, and while in retirement she sporadically released albums, there was nothing earth-shaking. Then in 2004, Lynn decided to work with a 28-year-old producer named Jack White. The two came together after the White Stripes dedicated their album White Blood Cells to Lynn and covered one of her songs. Lynn invited Jack and Meg White to visit her. After meeting with them, she agreed to do an album that Jack White wanted to produce. Lynn wrote all 13 songs, while White produced, co-wrote one song, performed a duet, and played a number of instruments. The album, Lear Rose, was released to universal acclaim. It peaked number 2 on the country charts and number 24 on the Billboard 200. The album was nominated for 5 Grammys and took home 2, Best Country Album and Best Country Collaboration with Vocals. Number 8. 2001. Dr. Dre was one of the founding members of the originators of gangster rap, NWA. After leaving NWA, Dr. Dre released his first solo album, The Chronic, in 1992, and it was critically and commercially successful. He won the Grammy for Best Rap Solo Performance, and the album also helped launch the career of Snoop Dogg, who was featured on it. After his initial success, Dr. Dre became more interested in producing and launching other artists. He released one single in 1996 called Been There, Done That, and it was met with lukewarm reception. By the mid-1990s, everyone assumed that Dr. Dre was just going to be a producer and would stop releasing his own music. However, after launching the career of Eminem, Dre released his second album, 2001, in 1999. It was a hit with both the critics and listeners. It reached number 2 on the US Billboard charts and ultimately went 6 times platinum. He was nominated for 5 Grammys and won 2 for Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group and Producer of the Year. After proving that he can still make great music, he has turned his attention back to producing and promoting headphones. Number 7. Songs for Young Lovers. Frank Sinatra is an American icon. He had a plethora of hits and starred in many classic movies. However, things weren't always going that way. By the end of the 1940s, Americans had become disenchanted with Sinatra. People's musical tastes were evolving away from what he performed. There were also reports about his ties to the mafia, and that didn't sit well with people, and Americans were getting weary of his personal life. He had divorced his wife, with whom he had 3 children, and had a publicized affair with Ava Gardner. His voice had also gotten much weaker throughout the years. So by the time the 1950s rolled around, he didn't have any movie contracts or a record label. Then in 1953, Sinatra won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in From Here to Eternity. He also signed Capitol Records, who gave him more artistic control. The first album he recorded was called Songs for Young Lovers, and Sinatra started working with a band conductor called Nelson Riddle. Over the next 20 years, they produced some of the biggest hits of Sinatra's career. With Capitol, he started recording albums focusing on one theme or mood. While this is common today, the concept was considered risky then. However, Sinatra released 16 albums in this style, giving him newfound fame and securing his legacy in the annals of American pop culture. Number 6. Brian Wilson presents Smile. The incredibly talented Brian Wilson is one of the co-founders of the Beach Boys. Their style started off as surfer rock, but under the guidance of Wilson, they became known for their sophisticated and artistic approach to pop music. The Beach Boys' most famous album, Pet Sounds, was released in 1966 and is widely regarded as one of the best and most influential albums of all time. The Beach Boys planned on following up their landmark album with a record called Smile, but that never happened because of Wilson's deteriorating mental health. Instead, in 1967, they released Smiley Smile, which they recorded in 6 weeks in Wilson's home studio. After this album, Wilson handed control of the band over to his brother Carl. Wilson also shelved Smile, and it looked like it was going to become one of those famous unfinished albums. Over the next couple of decades, Wilson lived in seclusion while he struggled with his mental health. He was diagnosed with depression and schizophrenia. He had a number of nervous breakdowns and became obese. He also had problems with addictions to cocaine, LSD, as well as alcohol. Then he started seeing a psychiatrist, and in 1988, he released his first solo album. He also started to work sporadically with the Beach Boys. Throughout the 1990s, he released a few albums that received mixed reviews. But in 2004, 37 years after he started working on the album, he released Smile. It was universally adored by critics and was nominated for 3 Grammys. Wilson took home his first ever Grammy for rock instrumental performance. Number 5. American Idiot. Green Day became internationally known after starting a mud fight at Woodstock in 1994. Their major label debut, Dookie, would go on to sell 20 million copies, and they won a Grammy for Best Alternative Music Performance. After their initial success, Green Day continued to release albums that performed well on the modern rock charts, but their other albums didn't enjoy the same mainstream success as Dookie. Then in 2004, 10 years after the release of their most successful album, Green Day released American Idiot. The rock opera was a departure from Green Day's normal 3-chord California punk songs. Critics loved it, and Green Day won a Grammy for Best Rock Performance. They gained a whole army of new fans who were too young to know Dookie. In 2015, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in their first year of eligibility. Number 4. 13. Pioneers of heavy metal, Black Sabbath formed in 1968 and released their self-titled debut in 1970. They had a massive hit with their second album, Paranoid. The band released 8 albums, but by the end of the 1970s, they were getting frustrated with lead singer Ozzy Osbourne. Osbourne had developed a drug habit, and this led to him being kicked out. After the split, Black Sabbath released Heaven and Hell in 1980 with their new lead singer, Ronnie James Dio, and it was well regarded. Osbourne released Blizzard of Oz in the same year, and it was the start of a very successful solo career. In the ensuing years, Osbourne became more popular than Black Sabbath, even though he was still dealing with his drug problems. After Black Sabbath released their 18th album, Forbidden, in 1995, they stopped releasing new music. In 1997, the band reunited with Osbourne on vocals and played on the Ozfest tour. After the initial reunion, Osbourne would occasionally play with Black Sabbath, but he was still focusing on his solo records. He also at the same time was running Ozfest and of course had his own reality show, The Osbournes. In late 2011, the band reunited and announced that they would be releasing a new album. While it was good news, not many people were clamoring for a new release. Yet the band released 13 in 2013, making it Black Sabbath's first album in 18 years and the first with Osbourne in 35 years. Expectations were pretty low, but with the help of producer Rick Rubin, they made an album that was liked by critics as well as fans. It was described as having the same energy and sound as their early albums, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard 200. It was also nominated for 3 Grammys and won the Grammy for Best Metal Performance. Number 3. Mama Said Knock You Out. In the opening lines of the title track of LL Cool J's 1990 album, he says, "Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years." But people did call it a comeback, one of the best in rap and hip-hop. After the immense success of his debut album, Radio, in 1985, LL Cool J released 2 albums that were poorly received. By 1990, not a whole lot was expected of him. People simply thought of him as out of touch or a sellout. Then, when Mama Said Knock You Out was released in 1990, it showed a revitalized rapper with an edge that had been lacking in his 2 previous outings. He received positive reviews and sold millions of copies. It relaunched LL Cool J's career, and he went on to release more albums and star in movies and television shows. The album is now considered a classic. Number 2. Taking the Long Way Home. Sometimes a comeback doesn't need to be after a hiatus or slump. In early 2003, the Dixie Chicks had a number 1 single and were set to go on a sold-out worldwide tour. On March the 19th, 2003, they were playing in London, England, when lead singer Natalie Maines said, "Just so you know, we're on the good side with y'all. We do not want this war, this violence, and we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." This was 9 days before the start of the US invasion of Iraq. The comment sparked immediate boycotts, album burnings, and condemnation by conservative pundits. When Maines made her statement, rock bands like Pearl Jam were continually rallying against the Bush administration, but while they angered people, they didn't even come close to feeling the wrath that the women who sang country received. A lot of comments were sexist, and they were threatened with violence and death. There were massive boycotts of their music by radio stations, and people picketed their concerts across the United States. Responding to the backlash, the light-hearted pop country band released their most personal album, Taking the Long Way Round, in 2006. Produced by Rick Rubin, the lead single was Not Ready to Make Nice, their response to all their detractors who told them to shut up and sing. The song struck a chord with critics and found a new audience because of the ferocity of the defiant lyrics and their passionate performance. Taking the Long Way Home was the biggest hit of their career, winning 3 Grammys. Their comeback album, which was written about losing fans, relaunched the Dixie Chicks and gained them more fans than they lost. Number 1. American recordings. Johnny Cash's long history of success dates back to his first single in 1955 called Cry, Cry, Cry. From there, Cash's popularity grew over the 60s, and he became one of the dominant forces in country music. But by the 70s, Cash was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and the caliber of his music wasn't nearly as good. Things reached a low point in 1986 when Columbia Records dropped him after 26 lucrative years together. After being dropped, Cash signed with Mercury Records, but by 1991 he didn't have a label. No one expected much from a country musician who was in his 60s. Country music had changed too much, and there was no place for him. That was why it was unusual when he signed with hard rock and hip-hop producer Rick Rubin. Rubin, who had only worked with young bands, produced the first album in Cash's American recording series at Cash's cabin in Tennessee. The stripped-down album only featured Cash on an acoustic guitar, covering songs picked by Rubin and himself. The goal was to bring out what made Cash so unique: his voice. Cash had the ability to sound powerful and yet vulnerable at the same time. When he sang the lyrics, he sounded wise, yet humble. The final product, released in 1994, was described as stark and gripping. It was unmistakably Johnny Cash, but an older and wiser version. It did well with critics and was enjoyed by a younger audience whose parents would have even been too young for his music. Cash himself said that this late stage of his career felt like the glory days of the 50s because he was making the music he wanted to make. Cash released 6 American recordings, and during this time, he had an incredible resurgence in popularity. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos that we've put together that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.